The streets were empty that night, the lamps flickering weakly as the wind carried the smell of baked bread from the houses. The alien woman stood in the shadows of an alley, her arms wrapped tightly around her thin body. Her skin, pale blue with faint silver lines glowing across it, made her impossible to hide. She pulled her torn shawl closer, but it did not keep out the cold. Her stomach growled loudly, and she pressed her hands against it, ashamed of the sound. For days she had eaten nothing but scraps from garbage bins. For weeks she had wandered without hope, and for months she had been completely alone. She was once a wife, once a mother, once a woman who belonged to a proud people, but now she was just a starving widow, forgotten by her kind. Her husband had died in the war that tore across the stars. The human armies and alien fleets clashed, and her people fled, leaving her stranded on Earth. To the humans, she was not a guest, not a refugee, but a stranger. Some called her dangerous, others called her worthless. Everywhere she went, doors closed. Everywhere she asked for help, voices told her to go away. That night, she watched from the dark corner of the street. Through the glowing windows, families sat together, eating warm soup and soft bread. Children laughed, their cheeks red from the fire's heat. Mothers carried trays, fathers raised mugs. The sounds of joy and comfort stabbed at her empty heart. She wanted nothing more than a place to sit, a bite of bread, and someone to tell her she was not invisible. But she knew no one would invite her inside. Her legs trembled, weak from hunger. She walked slowly to the back of a bakery. The smell of fresh loaves made her dizzy. Her hands shook as she searched the ground, hoping someone had dropped a piece. Her glowing eyes spotted a crust lying in the dirt, hard and covered with dust. She picked it up, brushed it off quickly and pressed it to her lips. The taste was bitter, but she swallowed it as if it were a treasure. Tears burned in her eyes, because this was what her life had become, from feasts of her people's world to crumbs in a dark human street. As she crouched near the bakery's wall, the sound of footsteps made her freeze. She pressed herself against the stone, her heart pounding. 2 men passed by, laughing with full bellies, carrying bags of food. One of them spotted her glowing eyes in the shadows and cursed. "Look, one of them again," he said harshly. "Why don't they just leave our town?" The other man laughed. "Maybe she's waiting for scraps like a stray dog." Their words cut deeper than the hunger. She lowered her gaze, holding the crumb close to her chest. She wanted to shout that she was not an animal, that she was a widow, a person, a soul, but her voice refused to come out. So she stayed silent, invisible, and the men walked away. Her knees gave out, and she slid down to the cold ground. She leaned against the wall, staring up at the sky. The stars above reminded her of her home, far beyond human reach. Once she believed her people would return for her. Once she thought someone would notice her suffering. But time had passed and no ship came. No hand reached for her. Her hope, already small, was almost gone. Her body felt too weak to keep standing much longer. Just then, a sound reached her ears. A soft laugh, not cruel, but innocent. She turned her head and saw a little human girl standing across the street. The girl had short brown hair and wide, curious eyes. She was holding a small piece of bread in her hand, warm and fresh. The child did not run, did not scream, did not throw stones like others sometimes did. Instead, she tilted her head and looked straight at the alien woman. The widow blinked, unsure if she was dreaming. Her vision blurred from hunger and tears. The child took a small step closer, her shoes tapping lightly on the stone. The alien widow's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She thought, "Will she also call me a monster? Will she laugh like the men?" But the girl only stood there, clutching the bread tightly. Her gentle eyes held something the widow had not seen in years. Pity, maybe even kindness. The alien woman's breath caught. Her weak hands trembled, not from hunger now, but from the strange feeling that someone finally saw her. Not as a beast, not as a curse, but as a living being. The moment was small, silent, and fragile. But it was enough to make her believe that her story was not yet over. Somehow, in the eyes of that little girl, she felt a spark of hope again. The little girl did not run away. She stood in the glow of a street lamp, the bread in her hand still warm, her small fingers clutching it tightly. The alien widow stared at her, confused, her weak body pressed against the wall for balance. No human child had ever looked at her without fear or disgust. But this child's eyes were soft, wide, and filled with something the widow had almost forgotten existed. Gentleness. The girl's name was Emily, though the alien widow did not yet know it. Emily tilted her head and studied the stranger in the shadows. Her heart ached as she saw the woman's thin frame, the sharp bones under her blue skin, the trembling hands holding only a dirty crust. Emily's mother had died when she was very young, so she knew what loneliness looked like. And this woman, this stranger with silver eyes, looked lonelier than anyone Emily had ever seen. Emily took another small step closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're hungry, aren't you?" The alien widow's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her throat was dry, her body weak. She could only nod slowly, her glowing eyes shining. With tears, the simple kindness of that question pierced through her heart. Humans had shouted at her, mocked her, cursed her, but never once had anyone asked her how she felt. Never once had anyone spoken with such softness. Emily stretched out her hand, offering the bread. The widow hesitated, staring at the warm piece. It was more food than she had eaten in days, but she was afraid. Afraid this was a trick. Afraid the kindness would be ripped away the moment she reached for it. Her hands trembled, her chest tight. Emily's eyes, however, never changed. They were steady, filled with an innocence that asked for nothing in return. Finally, the widow reached out, her fingers brushing against Emily's tiny hand as she took the bread. The warmth of it spread through her palm. She raised it slowly to her lips, afraid it might vanish. When she bit into it, the taste exploded in her mouth, soft, rich, and real. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed, not because of the taste alone, but because someone had cared enough to give it to her. She covered her mouth, ashamed of her tears, but Emily only smiled. The girl sat down on the cold stone beside her, legs swinging slightly. No fear, no hesitation, just the quiet comfort of a child who didn't see an enemy, only a person. For a long time, they sat in silence. The widow ate the bread slowly, making it last as long as possible. Emily watched her, her young mind turning over questions. Finally, she asked, "Why are you alone? Where is your family?" The widow froze, the bread halfway to her mouth. Her chest ached with the weight of memories she wanted to forget. But Emily's voice was too gentle, too sincere to ignore. With effort, the widow whispered, "My family, they are gone." Emily's eyes grew wide. She had lost her mother, but she still had her father. She could not imagine what it meant to have no one at all. The widow's voice cracked as she explained in broken words. "My husband, he fought in the war. He never came back, my people. Left me here. I have nothing." Her head bowed low, her glowing hair falling forward to hide her face. Emily's small heart swelled with sadness. She wanted to cry for this stranger, but instead, she reached out and touched the widow's hand. The alien woman flinched at the contact, unused to kindness, but Emily's grip was gentle and warm. For the first time in years, the widow did not feel entirely invisible. The wind grew colder, but Emily did not leave. She leaned closer, her voice low, as if sharing a secret. "My dad is lonely too," she said softly. The widow blinked, startled. She lifted her gaze, her silver eyes meeting Emily's brown ones. Emily whispered even quieter, Maybe you could marry him. Then we can be a family." The alien widow gasped, her breath caught in her throat, her heart raced with shock at the child's words. Marry her father? The thought was impossible, unbelievable, even foolish, and yet, something about the way Emily said it, with pure innocence and hope, made the widow's chest tighten. No one had ever spoken of her being part of a family again. She had accepted loneliness as her destiny, but this small girl, with her bread and her gentle eyes, spoke of a future that seemed too bright to be real. The widow shook her head slowly, whispering, I cannot. I am not human. I am broken." But Emily only smiled wider, as if she hadn't heard the protest. She hugged the woman's thin arm, whispering again, "You don't look broken to me. You look like someone who needs us." The alien widow's eyes burned with fresh tears. The child's words echoed in her mind, words that would not fade. Marry my dad. Be a family. Hope, something she thought dead long ago, stirred faintly inside her. She did not know if such a future was possible, but for the first time since her husband's death, she wanted to believe it could be. The night grew colder, but the little girl did not move from the alien woman's side. The widow still held the last piece of bread in her hands, too precious to finish quickly. Her body was weak, but her heart was trembling more from the strange warmth Emily had given her. No one had touched her kindly in years, and now a child had done what whole towns refused. It felt unreal, like a dream she feared would vanish if she blinked. Emily's voice broke the silence, soft and curious. "What is your name?" The widow lowered her head, her voice raspy. "My people called me Serenia." Emily repeated it slowly, smiling. Serenia. The name sounded fragile on human lips, but it filled the alien woman with a strange comfort. Someone had spoken her name again, after so long. She had been just stranger, alien, monster, for months. But now, in a child's voice, she was herself again. Serenia. Emily leaned closer, her small face serious. Serenia, do you want to stay alone forever? The widow's chest ached at the question. Her eyes dropped to the cold stone beneath her. I have no choice, she whispered. My people are gone. Your people hate me. There is no place for me. Her words trembled, heavy with despair. Emily frowned, shaking her head. That's not true. You could have a place. You could have a family. Serenia gave a broken laugh, bitter and hollow. A family? I lost my family in the war, little one. I cannot have it again. Her hands clutched at her chest as memories of her husband flooded back, his smile, his strong arms, his promise to return. But all of that had been stolen, replaced by loneliness and hunger. She shook her head, trying to push the pain away, but Emily would not let the silence settle. My dad is alone too, Emily whispered firmly. Her eyes glimmered with a mixture of innocence and determination. He works hard every day, but he is always sad. I know it. Serenia blinked, unsure how to answer. Emily's small hand gripped hers tightly. Maybe you can marry him, the girl whispered again, her voice trembling with hope. The words hit Serenia like a thunderclap. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stared at the child, her silver eyes wide with shock. Marry? Your father? She finally breathed. Her voice cracked, the thought too wild, too impossible. Emily nodded with all the seriousness a child could hold. Yes, if you marry him, then you will not be alone, and he will not be alone, and I will not be alone. We will be a family. Serenia shook her head quickly. No, little one. I am not human. Your people would never allow it. Your father would never accept it. Her chest heaved as she tried to calm her racing heart, but Emily's eyes were steady, full of belief that innocence alone could give. You don't know until you try, the girl said softly. Her voice was gentle, but it carried a strange strength. The widow looked away, her eyes burning. She wanted to believe, but the years of rejection weighed on her. Your father would hate me, she whispered. He would throw me out like the others. Emily shook her head, her grip tightened. No, my dad is kind. He listens to me. If I ask him, he will not throw you away. Serenia's tears spilled again, rolling down her cheeks. This child, this small human with nothing but bread and soft words, was daring to speak of hope. It felt dangerous to even imagine it, but inside her something stirred, a faint heartbeat of longing, to sit at a table again, to hear laughter, to be seen not as a curse but as a person. Could such a dream ever be true? Emily leaned her head against Serenia's thin arm, whispering, You look sad, but I think you just need someone to care for you. The widow's hands trembled violently. No one had said such words to her since her husband's death. She tried to push them away, to protect herself from disappointment, but the warmth of the child's touch made her walls crack. Slowly, she lifted her arm and placed it gently around Emily's shoulders. The embrace was awkward, hesitant, but real. Her heart beat faster, as if reminding her that she was still alive, still capable of feeling. Emily smiled up at her. See, you don't have to be alone anymore. Serenia wanted to argue, wanted to deny it, but the words tangled in her throat. For the first time in years, she could not bring herself to say, I am hopeless. Instead, her lips trembled with silence. The sound of distant voices made her freeze, men laughing again, footsteps heavy on the stone. She pulled Emily closer, hiding her glowing eyes in the shadows. Fear rushed through her, not for herself, but for the child. If they saw Emily sitting with her, they would be cruel. But Emily didn't move away, she only held tighter. The child's trust was unshaken, and it filled Serenia with both terror and awe. When the voices faded, Serenia finally whispered, You are not afraid of me? Emily shook her head, smiling with certainty. No, you're not scary, you're just hungry, you're just sad, Her simple words pierced deeper than any blade. Serenia's breath hitched. She looked into Emily's gentle eyes and saw no lies, no hatred, just truth, simple and pure. That night, under the flickering street lamp, an alien widow who had lost everything found something she thought impossible. In the soft whisper of a child offering family, hope was planted inside her heart. It was fragile, uncertain, and frightening, but it was there, alive, waiting to grow. Emily's small hand tugged gently at Serenia's arm. Come with me, the girl whispered, her eyes shining with a mixture of excitement and determination. The alien widow hesitated, her body frozen in fear. She had never stepped inside a human's home. Every door had been shut to her. Every glance had been filled with suspicion. Her heart pounded painfully as she whispered, "No, they will not accept me. I will cause trouble for you." But Emily only shook her head stubbornly. "You need food and you need a place. My dad will help." Serenya's chest tightened at the child's faith. How could such a little girl believe in her so strongly when grown men spat at her feet? But Emily's grip was unyielding, her warmth too difficult to refuse. Weak and trembling, Serenya allowed herself to be led through the quiet street. The night air was sharp, and every shadow made her anxious. She feared someone would see her, someone would call out, someone would throw stones. But Emily walked with such confidence, as if she had no doubt they would be safe. Serenya followed, her thin steps dragging on the stone road. They reached a small, weathered house at the edge of town. Its windows glowed faintly with firelight, and the roof looked patched in many places. It was not grand, but it looked alive. Emily pushed open the wooden door and pulled Serenya inside. The widow's breath caught in her throat. Warmth enveloped her instantly. The smell of stew lingered in the air. The crackle of fire filled the room. It was more comfort than she had felt in years. At the table sat a man, tall and broad-shouldered. His hair was dark, his face tired, with lines that showed both strength and sorrow. He looked up as the door creaked open. His sharp eyes narrowed when he saw the alien woman standing behind his daughter. He rose slowly, his presence heavy, his voice firm. "Emily, who is this?" Emily's little hands clung tighter to Serenya's arm. "She's my friend, Dad. She was hungry, so I brought her home." The man's jaw clenched, his eyes fixed on Serenya. For a moment she felt the familiar sting of rejection about to come. Her chest ached, her throat dry. She whispered quickly, I will go. I did not mean to enter. Forgive me." But before she could turn, Emily cried out, "No, Dad, please. She has nowhere to go. She hasn't eaten. Look at her." The man, John, stepped closer, his gaze stern. Serenya lowered her eyes, bracing for harsh words. But instead of shouting, John sighed heavily. He glanced at his daughter, then back at the starving widow. The firelight flickered across her thin face and trembling hands. He could see the truth of Emily's words without needing to ask. For a long moment, silence stretched, heavy and uncertain. Finally, John spoke quietly. "Sit down." Serenya's eyes widened in shock. She had expected to be thrown out, to be cursed, but instead, he offered her a chair. Emily beamed, pulling her toward the table. The widow moved slowly, as if afraid it was all a cruel trick. She sat at the edge of the chair, her posture tense, her hands folded tightly. John placed a bowl of stew in front of her, steam rising from it. The smell alone made her dizzy. Her stomach growled loudly, and shame filled her face. But John only pushed the bowl closer. "Eat," he said simply. With trembling fingers, Serenya lifted the spoon. The first taste nearly broke her. Warmth filled her body, the flavors rich and deep. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she ate. Each bite felt like a blessing she did not deserve. Emily watched her happily, proud of her choice. John, however, watched with quiet caution. He did not smile, but he did not push her away either. After she finished, Serenya lowered her head, whispering, "Thank you. I will work. I will repay this kindness. I will not stay long." John studied her, his expression unreadable. Emily interrupted quickly. "She doesn't have to go, Dad. She can help us. She can stay with us." Her voice carried the same stubborn certainty as before. Serenya's heart squeezed painfully at those words. Stay? The thought was too much, too dangerous. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "No, little one. Your father will not want me here." John finally spoke, his tone low. "This house has little, but what we share honestly." He looked directly into Serenya's eyes. "For tonight, you can stay, but I do not know about tomorrow." The words were not a promise, but they were not rejection either, and to Serenya, who had known nothing but closed doors, it felt like a miracle. That night, as Emily drifted to sleep near the fire, Serenya sat quietly in the corner of the room. She listened to the crackling wood, the slow breathing of the child. Her eyes glistened as she touched the edge of the blanket Emily had thrown over her lap. Warmth, food, a roof, and protection. Things she thought she would never feel again. Her heart beat with cautious hope. She glanced at John, who sat silently with his arms crossed, saying, "Airing into the flames." He said nothing more, but his silence did not feel hostile. It felt like the silence of a man who carried burdens of his own. And so, in a small, humble house at the edge of town, an alien widow who had lost everything tasted human kindness once more. For the first time in years, she was not outside in the cold. For the first time in years, she did not feel completely alone. She did not yet know what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, hope had entered her heart again. The days that followed were quiet, yet heavy with unspoken feelings. Serenia remained in the small home, always in the corner, always careful not to disturb. She rose early, before John, and tried to make herself useful. She swept the floor with her trembling hands. She washed the dishes, though her fingers were raw. When Emily dropped her toys, Serenia gathered them with care. Her every action carried the same silent message. I will repay your kindness, even if it is only with small things. Emily, however, treated her as more than a guest. She laughed with Serenia, asked her stories of the stars, and tugged her along when she wanted to play. The alien widow found herself telling simple tales of her homeworld. Mountains made of crystal, seas that glowed at night, skies filled with twin moons. Her voice shook at first, but Emily's wide eyes gave her courage. For the first time in years, Serenia's memories brought not only pain, but also warmth. Emily listened as if every word was treasure, and sometimes she would fall asleep in Serenia's arms. The widow would hold her gently, afraid to let go, afraid that this fragile bond might vanish. John, however, remained distant. He watched her carefully, never unkind but never close either. At meals, he served her food without a word. When their eyes met, he quickly looked away. His silence was like a wall, firm and unbroken. Yet Serenia noticed small cracks. Once, when she struggled to carry a heavy bucket of water, John took it from her without a word. Another time, when she coughed from the cold night air, he left an extra blanket near her sleeping place. He did not speak of kindness, but his actions betrayed a quiet protection. Still, Serenia's heart was restless. She feared that at any moment John might tell her to leave. She feared that Emily's sweet faith in her would not be enough. Each night, she lay awake listening to the wind against the walls, her thoughts twisted between fear and longing. Could this small family ever truly accept me? Or am I only here until their pity ends? One evening, Emily sat at the table drawing shapes on old scraps of paper. She looked up suddenly and said with a smile, "Dad, Serenia tells the best stories. She makes me laugh." John glanced at the alien widow, then nodded slowly. "That's good," he said simply, returning to his work. But Emily was not done, her young heart bold. "Dad, she should stay forever, then we'll never be lonely again." Serenia froze, the spoon in her hand shaking. Her breath caught as she dared to look at John. His eyes lifted to hers for a long moment, searching, questioning, but he said nothing, only turned his gaze back to the fire. The silence was heavier than words. Serenia's chest tightened, a painful mix of hope and fear. She wanted to believe Emily's dream, but she was too afraid to reach for it. The next day, Serenia tried to give more than she had before. She mended torn cloth with clumsy stitches. She tended to the small garden behind the house, pulling weeds with careful hands. She even tried to repair the broken hinge on the door. Though she cut her palm in the process, John noticed the bandage later, and for the first time his voice softened. "You don't have to hurt yourself trying to fix everything." Serenia lowered her head, whispering, "I must do something. I cannot only take." John's eyes lingered on her, but he said nothing more. That night, Emily crawled into Serenia's lap with a yawn. "Will you tell me a story again?" she asked. Serenia stroked her hair gently, her voice quiet. She spoke of a star that refused to die, shining even when darkness tried to swallow it. Emily's eyes fluttered closed as she whispered, "That star is like you." Serenia's heart broke at the words, tears slipping down her cheeks. She kissed the child's forehead softly, whispering back, "No, little one, you are the star." The fragile bond between them grew stronger each day. Emily's laughter filled the house with warmth. Serenia's hands, though weak, gave what care they could. And John, though silent, began to watch with eyes less guarded. He saw how Emily smiled brighter than she had in years. He saw how Serenia never asked for more than she was given. He saw the pain in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. And though he said nothing, something inside him began to shift. But outside the little house, whispers spread. The townsfolk had seen the alien woman walking with Emily. They had seen her thin frame moving in and out of the small garden. Murmurs began to rise, filled with suspicion and anger. "Why is that thing living with them?" some asked. "Is the child safe?" Others whispered. The voices grew sharper. carrying the same cruel edge Serenia had heard before. Though she tried to ignore it, fear gnawed at her heart. She knew that fragile bonds could be broke, and by harsh hands, and she wondered if the small hope she found here would soon be ripped away. Yet as she lay down that night, Emily's tiny hand tucked into hers. Serenia allowed herself to dream of what it might mean to belong again. It was fragile, uncertain, and dangerous. But it was also the only thing keeping her alive. The morning was gray, the air heavy with the scent of rain. Serenia moved quietly around the small kitchen, her hands steady as she placed bowls on the table. Emily hummed softly as she braided her doll's hair, her innocent laughter warming the little house. John sat near the fire, repairing his boots with rough hands. It was almost peaceful, almost ordinary, but Serenia's heart was uneasy. For days she had felt the eyes of the townsfolk on her whenever she stepped outside. Their whispers carried through the streets, sharp and cruel. She tried to ignore them, tried to stay hidden, but rumors spread faster than truth. By evening, the whispers became voices, and the voices became shouts. A group of townsfolk gathered outside the small house, their torches glowing in the dusk. The noise startled Emily, who clutched her doll tightly. Serenia froze, her body trembling as memories of other angry crowds flooded back. She had been chased before, driven from alleys, denied bread from bakers. Now it was happening again. But this time, Emily and John were inside with her. John stood, his face grim. He stepped to the window and saw the crowd growing, their angry faces twisted with fear and suspicion. "Bring her out," one man shouted. "That thing doesn't belong here. She'll curse the child," another yelled. Serenia's chest tightened, her breath shallow. She wanted to flee, to run into the night and vanish before harm could come to them. But Emily ran to her side, wrapping her small arms around Serenia's waist. "Don't leave," the girl whispered fiercely. "You're safe here." The door shook as fists pounded against it. "John, open up," a familiar voice shouted. One of his neighbors, John's jaw clenched, his body rigid weighing. With anger, he pulled Emily behind him, his broad frame shielding both her and Serenia. When the pounding grew louder, he threw open the door himself. The night wind rushed in, carrying the smell of smoke and the heat of torches. A dozen faces glared at him, their eyes filled with judgment. "She has no place here," a man growled, pointing at Serenia. "She is dangerous, John. You're putting your daughter at risk." "She's nothing but a burden," another spat. "Send her away before worse comes." John's voice cut through the chaos, low but firm. "She is under my roof," he said, his words steady as stone. The crowd murmured in shock, but he continued, louder. "She has done no harm. She is no threat. She is hungry, and we gave her food. That is all." "Food today," one woman sneered. "What about tomorrow? What if she turns against you?" "Or brings others like her," another muttered. "You're a fool, John." The anger in their voices grew. Serenia's heart pounded painfully, her legs weak. She wanted to speak, to beg them not to hate her, but her voice refused to rise. Her silver eyes shimmered with tears as she clutched the wooden table for support. John stepped forward, his fists clenched. "She stays," he declared, his voice sharp as steel. "You have no say in what happens inside my home." The crowd roared with protest, but John did not flinch. He stood firm, his shoulders broad, his face hard. Emily peeked from behind him, her eyes wide but fearless. "She's not bad," she shouted, her small voice piercing the noise. "She's my friend. She's family now." The words stunned the crowd for a moment, but then came cruel laughter. "Family," one man mocked. "A human child calling that creature family?" Serenia's chest burned with shame and pain. She wanted to tell Emily to stop, to let her go, but Emily's little hands gripped hers tighter, refusing to let go. John raised his hand for silence, his voice a growl. "Enough. You all know me. You all know my work. I have lived here my whole life. I will protect my daughter, and I will protect the one under my roof. If anyone wishes to test that, then step forward now." The crowd shifted uneasily, their anger meeting the solid wall of John's determination. Torches flickered, but no one dared step closer. One by one, they lowered their eyes, muttering as they drifted back into the shadows of the night. The pounding of fists was gone. The shouts faded into silence. Only the wind remained, carrying away the smoke. When the door closed, Serenia collapsed onto the chair, her whole body shaking. She had never seen anyone defend her like that since her husband died. Her tears flowed freely, unstoppable. Emily hugged her tightly, whispering, "See? You're safe with us. You don't have to be afraid." John stood silently near the fire, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. He glanced at Serenia, his eyes softer now, though still guarded. You don't deserve their hatred, he said quietly. You've suffered enough. Serenia lifted her gaze, her lips trembling. Her heart swelled with emotions she couldn't name. Gratitude, disbelief, and something more fragile. For the first time in years, someone had stood in front of her. Someone had chosen to fight for her instead of against her. The moment was heavy, filled with unspoken words. In that silence, a fragile bond between John and Serenia began to form. Not of pity, not of fear, but of trust. And though danger still lingered outside, inside that little home, something new had been born. The night after the townsfolk left was long and restless. Serenia sat near the fire, her hands trembling as the warmth of the flames touched her skin. Emily had fallen asleep curled against her, her small fingers still wrapped around Serenia's hand, refusing to let go. John sat across the room, his face shadowed, his eyes on the fire, his silence heavy. But beneath the silence, Serenia felt something had changed, not just for her, but for all of them. She remembered the way John had stood at the door, his voice sharp, his body like a wall between her and the crowd. No one had defended her like that since her husband died. Even when her own people abandoned her, no one had chosen her side. Yet here, in a small wooden house far from the stars, a human man had claimed her safety as his own. Her heart trembled with a feeling both frightening and warm. Could she truly belong here? Could she truly be seen not as a burden, but as family? The next morning, Emily's laughter filled the kitchen. She tugged on Serenia's hand, insisting she sit at the table. John placed bowls of porridge down, his movements firm, his face unreadable. But when Serenia whispered, I can eat later, he shook his head. Sit, he said, his tone leaving no space for refusal. She obeyed, her heart racing. Each spoonful of porridge felt like more than food. It felt like acceptance, even if unspoken. After breakfast, Emily ran outside to play, her giggles carrying into the air. Serenia remained at the table, her hands folded tightly. Her voice broke the silence, fragile and trembling. You risked much for me last night. I do not understand why. John looked at her, his eyes steady but softened. Because no one deserves to be treated like that, he said simply. You've done no harm here. You've cared for Emily, and that is enough. His words struck her like a gentle blow. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were not from sorrow. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I thought I would never be protected again. For a moment, John's gaze lingered on her face, as if he wanted to speak more. But instead he looked away, busying himself with tools on the shelf. Yet Serenia noticed the faint warmth in his expression, not pity, but respect. Later that day, Emily dragged Serenia to the small garden. Look, you can help me plant these, she chirped, holding seeds in her little hands. Serenia knelt beside her, pressing the seeds into the soil, her pale fingers darkened with earth. Emily grinned, her eyes shining. You'll stay, right? You'll be here when they grow? Serenia's heart stopped, her breath catching. Stay. Such a small word, but so heavy. She smiled faintly, brushing Emily's hair from her face. If your father allows it, then yes, I will stay. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in red and gold, John sat quietly by the fire while Serenia mended a torn sleeve. Emily leaned sleepily against her father, her voice soft. Dad, you should marry her, she murmured boldly, half asleep. The words made Serenia freeze, the cloth slipping from her hands, her face burned, her chest tight. She dared not look up, afraid of what John's reaction might be. John stiffened, glancing at his daughter. Emily, he said carefully, that's not how things work. But Emily only smiled, drifting into dreams. She makes us happy. She makes us family, she whispered before sleep claimed her. The silence that followed was heavy. Serenia's heart pounded, every second stretching endlessly. Finally, John spoke, his voice low but steady. She's not wrong. Serenia's eyes shot up, shock written across her face. John met her gaze, his own steady though uncertain. This house has been empty of laughter for a long time. Emily smiles again because of you and... He paused, his throat tight. And I find myself grateful that you are here. Serenia's breath trembled, her silver eyes shimmering with tears. She had prepared herself for rejection, but never for words like these. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I am broken, John. I have nothing left to give. But John shook his head, his voice firm. You give more than you know. You've brought life back into this house. The fire crackled softly, filling the silence between them. At last, Serenia lowered her head, whispering with trembling lips, Then if you will have me, I will stay, not as a burden, but as part of this family. John's eyes softened, and though he did not reach for her hand, his nod was enough. In that small moment, something unspoken became real. The walls of loneliness that had surrounded them all began to fall. The days that followed carried new warmth. Serenia cooked small meals with Emily, learned to laugh at human jokes, and found herself smiling more often. John worked long hours but returned each evening to a home no longer filled with silence. Though the townsfolk still whispered, their voices mattered less, because inside the wooden walls of that humble house, something stronger had been built. One night, as Emily lay asleep in her bed, Serenia stood by the window, gazing at the stars. Her husband's memory drifted through her heart, but instead of grief, she felt peace. A gentle hand rested on her shoulder, and she turned to find John beside her. He said nothing, but the look in his eyes told her all she needed to know. She was not a stranger anymore. She was not a curse, not a burden. She was family. And so the starving widow, once abandoned and alone, found hope where she least expected it. Not in her own people, not in promises of the past, but in the kindness of a human child and the steady strength of her father. Together, they were no longer three lonely souls. They were a family, bound not by blood, but by love, trust, and the courage to care.